Hello everybody, my name is Luna and welcome back to the channel. Now today, what we're doing is we're just doing a quick review over these newer classes as well as the event dungeon. I will also be showing off the builds that I use with them and stuff like that. And you're wondering why I'm not using a face cam. It's because this is now the second time we're recording this. I recorded it and the face cam was lagging, well, the voice was lagging behind. I don't know why. Everything else was on par, it was just my voice, I don't know why. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So, the first new one is the Executioner. As you can see, based on the base stats that it shows, it does get a high attack stat, good, decent defense, good, pretty bad explorability, but with a high difficulty rating, even though I disagree with that due to its strength. Being an STR class, I don't really find those to be really all that difficult. I think they're kind of bare bones. So this is what its starting abilities get. You get Execution, chance to kill enemies instantly with low HP. Basically the same thing as Finishing Blow. It does get a pretty decent HP pool. Pretty good if you want to go for an HP build or a damage reduce build, since it gets some starting damage reduce. It does have a good critical starting at 30%. You could definitely go with a crit hybrid with it as well pretty easily. Then for starting abilities, sorry I had to get into a quick match before we got into those. So it gets Wait and See, which is obviously, that gets removed based on your amulet anyway, which you would most likely be using an amulet, at least if you have one. Then you have Sharpened Blades, which is in my opinion the best ability out of all of its starting abilities. Gaining 100 sniping for 10 turns is pretty good, as that will increase the crit damage, which again, it already gets a pretty solid crit power anyway. Then gaining a 10 power level is pretty decent as well, because it'll increase your power by 10%. This, in my opinion, is one of its worst abilities with Neck Chopper. Having a 5-turn cooldown to attack an enemy with just a base power of 250 is kind of meh. I mean, there are better ones, like you have Plunging Slash in that is a first strike that I believe is 350. Now, how it says attack an enemy, hit 15, that I don't fully understand. I've seen a couple abilities with this marking on it, and I don't ever see a second attack go off. It's possible that it is a second strike, but even if it is, hitting someone for 15 damage, what the hell is that gonna do? They're just going to laugh at that. Then you have Twirl, which with a DR build, also known as damage reduce build, or with an HP build, this ability could be pretty good. I personally still don't normally use it, just because I don't normally like taking the extra damage gain, especially in the Extreme Dungeon. When in the Extreme Dungeon you start falling behind in level, which I'll be able to show you a good example of that when we're done discussing these classes, when we're going over the class the dungeon overview, sorry. But that's just the reason why I wouldn't take it for the Extreme. Master, you could probably get away with it. Extreme, you would probably get yourself killed. Alright, next up is the Old Doctor. I'm just gonna be blunt, I don't really like this class at all. I think it is a pretty bad class, at least as far as comparing it to the others. Could you use it and still see success? Sure. I mean, Eternal Dark makes it to where anything can pretty much be usable. But I mean, without Eternal Dark, I don't really find this class to see really any success. I mean, it could if you did a high healing class, but I mean, the amount of healing you'd have to stack on to be able to make use of its passive, tack that on to the kind of rare items it would need, because like it would want to have Blood Contract. So unless you have Blood Contract as a lab part, which I unfortunately do not, you pretty much can't use its passive to its full potential, and even then you still have to roll self-harm to be able to do that. And then at that point, you also still would want things like Vitality, you would still want a Barrier Generator to take use of Vitality, you'd want HP boost, you'd want a high HP percentage. There is so many things you would need to make this passive really work that I just don't like it. And if you don't know what the passive is, it's this medical technology ability. It says instead of consuming your HP, you will heal yourself and earn a max HP bonus. Now notice it doesn't say HP to full. It's because it will not heal you to full HP, at least based on my experiences with it, it wasn't. It just gives you a small HP bonus, normally as much as you would hurt yourself for, and then that's it. So if you were going to take 30 damage, you would heal 30 damage, and then it would increase your max HP what seemed like about the same amount. So that was kind of a whoop-de-doo for that. Now granted, it does gain the extra healing, an extra 40%, which you would increase to 30 by 40% in that case. But I mean, even then, it still just isn't enough, even with burst heal allowing it to crit, because unless you have overheal on this thing, it's just not gonna work, because you need overheal to be able to be above your maximum HP. And even though this thing says it doesn't just temporarily, it seems like to me it was a temporary max HP bonus. I did not notice it as a permanent HP bonus, but I mean, I've only played this class a couple times. I'm still going to experiment with him and see and find some more stuff out. If anything changes, obviously I'll come back and update this video on him. But as of now, that's where he stands with me. Then the next issue I have with him is the stats he scales with. Pi and Dex are not very good combination. Dex to me is more of an avoidance ability. It has a lot of good abilities to stack with avoiding things or with strength, because it can kind of go hand in hand with strength. When it comes to Pi is a healing ability. It's good with things like Revenant and things like that, or Angel's Army. It's not really all that great when we're talking a class that's avoiding, where one of its best moves is backstab, and it can do 350 and just go straight through barriers and ignore all defenses. That's basically the best ability you're going to get out of this thing with a Revenant combination. Because when it comes to that, you kind of have to pick and choose. If you don't get Almighty, which unless you're using a reroll build with an Eternal Dark, that's the only way you're really going to get Almighty on this guy. So I mean, this guy is pretty much strictly needing Eternal Dark to be very usable. And I think that was kind of the purpose behind building him. I think when they made him, because obviously, when they made Eternal Dark, it'd be the next piece in a lab part. Obviously, when they were releasing new dungeons, they had to release them to be harder, but they also had to release things to compensate it as well. So then you go to his other stuff. Obviously, his attack is rated decently. His defense is at 5 bars, which is understandable. Defense-wise, you're going to be pretty stacked. It's going to be pretty hard to kill this dude. Then you have his Explore ability, which is at 4. I didn't see Teleport. No, he doesn't. So without Teleport, I would kind of disagree with that. I think it would be the same as every other class that doesn't have Teleport or Scouting just blatantly on them, and that would be 2. I don't know how the devs decide on the Explorability stat line when they put that on there, but to me, the only 2 stats that really affect that are going to be, well, 3, is Phasing, Teleport, Scouting. Without those 3, you may as well be sitting at 2 bars just like everybody else. And then lastly, his difficulty's at 3. I'd actually agree with that, just because, I mean, he's not really all that difficult. It just comes down to he has a bad stat line. Alright, and then these are his starting abilities. Obviously, without any kind of boosters, he's only getting 100 HP, which ain't that great. But, then we have, like, Wait and See. Same thing everybody gets, unless you use an Amulet. Then you have Surgery. Deal damage to yourself, 35, just to gain an auto heal. For 5 turns, that's not really all that great. Especially, even though I know the point of it is to do this, increase my max HP, and then gain that. But yeah, see, it's not even a permanent status effect. It's only a temporary, and it lasts for 10 turns. So, I mean, that's keep in mind when you're moving rooms, that also counts as a turn. So you're looking, you may get a little bit of use out of it, but for that specific ability, you ain't gonna get anything out of it. Then you have phlebotomy, sorry, I don't know what the hell I just said. And it's just deal damage to yourself with a power of 35 to cure all your debuffs. Now this, to me, is a pretty solid ability, probably the best thing he gets to start out with. Again, there are better options. I believe there's an ability called Willpower. I know that there is a one that goes on your character that makes it to where you're immune to confusion, but I think there's also an ability that you can use just like over here, we'll wait and see in that. That is a T ability, meaning it doesn't end your turn. And that one also removes all your debuffs, and it doesn't cost you HP, nor does it end your turn. Whereas this thing, you would have to find a special version of it to prevent it from ending your turn. And then at that point, you're also taking an increased cooldown. And I guess that's the best thing about this one, is it doesn't have a very long cooldown. But I mean, when you think about it, you're losing your turn, unless you have ninjutsu, you're losing your turn just to remove debuffs and slightly increase your maximum HP. Then you have Bleed, which this is kind of a okay attack. I mean, if I was making a build for him, I was throwing something on him, I'd be throwing something on him with a 0 cooldown, like Holy Bolt or something, just so he has a 0 cooldown ability. So this thing I don't really think is all that great. The best thing about it is just its base stat of 120. But I mean, you can just use the ranged attack, which you will find all the damn time when you're rolling for abilities. It's a very common ability, and then its passives are it just gains extra attacks versus just adding extra bleed with just 1 cooldown reduction when you finally get it maxed, versus ranged attack will attack someone 3 times based on 100 with, I think, 5 less accuracy. It may even just be 100, but nonetheless, none of this ability is really worth it. You probably would end up swapping it out for a pie ability once you find it, like Holy Bless or something, maybe even a healing ability. Then when you tack on the fact that all it's doing is just adding bleed to your enemy, like really? Okay, for this dungeon it would help with the immortal enemies, but that's about it. Alright, and then we have builds. So for builds, obviously, we're going to be doing a couple of them. There is the Eternal Dark builds that we always have, which are basically always the same. Eternal Dark, followed by Gambling. If I had a second Gambling, I would throw that on there, just to increase its power. But normally, you can just do this, this, that, and then you have 1 free slot, which this would mainly be based on how many soul stones you have, your contracts, stuff like that. If you were using Kinton Gold, then I would just go all out on the rerolls, and I would throw either Empowered Reroll on there, or I would just go over here and throw that extra 15 luck on there, unless I'm doing the extreme variant. Then I may end up leaving it as is, and in its place I would end up taking either some extra health, like this HP LV plus 60. You also could take in the Vampire just for a little bit of extra sustain, and then Berserker's always good. Haste for lowering your cooldowns. Limit Break is good on any build, no matter what, because it's a very needed ability. Granted, especially if you're doing a floor 100 build, you will want this thing at least +2. And then past that, the best thing after that would just be something like Enhanced Defense, Frenzy if you have a willpower part. But Enhanced Defense would also help buff up his damage reduction. So then, another build we have is the Robustness build. This thing is a DR build. So then you'd be doing that. You could throw this on there for some extra HP. This way you have a really big HP pool, and you also will be having a very solid defense. Because with you already starting out at 10%, Enhanced Defense will double that when you get hit, putting you up to 20. And then robustness will give you even more damage reduce when you get hit as well. So since this all stacks, you'll be pretty beefy. You'll probably have about a 95% damage reduce just based off this alone, as after probably like 2 hits, especially if you can get Emperor's Armor, which comes with 25%, and if you end up getting Storm, which gives you another 25, you would end up being guaranteed to be at 95, but you're easily going to be able to reach 95 just with those 2 abilities alone. So since we wouldn't be using Eternal Dark in this instance, you probably don't need to go with Commander's Chestplate or our Emperor, or what, I can't remember what its name is all of a sudden. Commander's Chestplate, I believe. Commander's Armor. You wouldn't probably need to go with that, just because, unless you wanted just this base strength boost with the HP boost. Because it is still a pretty solid armor, even for this build. But personally, I would be more likely to use either Soil or Griffin Wing. Griffin Wing is one of my personal favorites because of its passive of, for each ability on cooldown, you're gaining parry, which goes great if you end up going with cross block, because you could use cross block instead of enhanced defense if you wanted. And it would actually work out pretty well, because cross block would reduce your damage by 20% for your parry. So, at least the one I have, you could probably get a different one that would be stronger. But if you did that with Griffin Wing, it would help out a ton. As for a weapon, I would probably go with Graham, or I would go with Blizzard, because with Graham, it will let you strike twice. Obviously, you also get the penetration with Graham as well, which means when you're running into the barrier enemies in this dungeon, which there are a lot, it makes it much easier to attack through them. Which is why you could also replace enhanced defense or even the HP LV60 with some penetration. If you have a good enough one to put on there, obviously a 10% is not going to be worth throwing on there. You want at least 20. Then, the next, as far as Blizzard goes, it's pretty self-explanatory. With his base crit, Blizzard will help him out a lot, just because it will give him the ability to stun an enemy each time he strikes them, pretty much. Then next up is an HP build to stack with that. So this is where we would throw that on there. We also would be putting HP boost. Put up some max HP right here. And max HP LV60. And then that would actually give him a very big health pool. Because not only is he starting out with a decently sized health pool, I think you actually will be starting out with over 1000 HP with this kind of build. But it will also get bigger as you level up, and it gives you one extra slot to pretty much put whatever you want there, as I said, like haste, limit break, extra luck, reroll, whatever the hell you want to put on there. So all of that would go great. And then next up, we have our old doctor yet again. So for him, again, I did discuss the other ones that would go good with him and the abilities you would need. But to me, the only thing that I have that really works for him is the Eternal Dark builds, which is Eternal Dark, Gambling, Alchemy, and then probably either an Empowered Reroll or Luck, depending on what I feel like doing. That would be it. There is no other real chain that works. I mean, yeah, you could go with a DR or an HP build just like you can with Executioner, but to me the Executioner performs it so much better. The DR build with him, it doesn't work as well because Enhanced Defense doesn't have a base to buff, so it just buffs the amount the Robustness gives after the first time it's used, and then that is pretty decent. But unless you have, like, heck, there isn't even an armor that goes with them that gives you base DR, so I mean there's not even really a good side option to get it unless you manage to roll something that just has DR built into it. So overall, that's about it for them. Next up is the actual dungeon review. And for that, I'm going to end up going to my royalty that I have built over here. So this dungeon has been a pretty difficult dungeon. I guess I'm actually level 61, which is actually kind of surprising, but I guess I am on floor 21, so it makes sense. So keep in mind, as you go up in the chain, you start getting less XP per enemy killed. You also gain less... They also get harder. Not only they get stronger and level than you, but they also add in, for this dungeon specifically, they are throwing in more changed enemies. What that means is they'll have certain abilities to them, like immovable, immortal, things like that. So if we go to this enemy, how it says of eyes, so you click on him and you'd see what that of eyes is giving him. An extra 200% HP with tracking, making both a parry and avoid worthless. So again, this class was Eternal Darked. This is the only Eternal Dark build I have had work for this game so far in this dungeon. This dungeon has completely annihilated Eternal Dark. Anytime I've tried to use it, I've basically been petrified to death, or I've just been completely one-shot because I just don't have the damage resistance or anything like that to be able to assist. If you go back to the lab part section, you will see at the top I did have something called Voice of God. That's also the Valkyrie default ability. That to me is one of the best abilities in this dungeon, solely for the fact that it removes Petrify at the end of the battle, so which means when you get into another fight, you don't have to worry about already being partially petrified. Then, as far as other tips go for this dungeon, I mean, as we can even see here, the dude's level 123 to me being level 61. This guy out-levels me by basically double my level. He's twice my level yet. Granted, we're going to one-shot him because, I mean, we have Eternal Dark, and we managed to get lucky enough with rolls that we have the strength we need to be able to kill him. Now, whether I can kill the final boss, I don't know, because I haven't made it to him yet. And then, as far as what you should be taking items with you, let's see here, let's switch over. I'll just switch over to the Valkyrie. That's a decent one to be at. So with the Valkyrie, if you have ingredient, you may want to take it. If you have the reroll stuff to go with it. If not, if you can get High Tide, you may want to take that. Because since it comes with Steadfast Stance, granted, it will nullify, keep in mind, it will nullify your own status changes as well. If you are going with a reroll build, do not take it, because it will nullify gambling. It will make gambling pretty useless, actually, just because it will only increase your luck by 5 each time you use it, which doesn't really work. But for these, definitely take it if you aren't going with that and you're going with like a robust build or something like that. It will just give you a little bit of extra health and defense on top of it. As you can see, I have one that I've changed and one that is just base right underneath it. You could also just go with ingredient with a reroll build. Another good one that I've found for this place is Benefit of Faith with its resurrection ritual and its self-defense with a built-in willpower. I don't remember if it came with willpower or if it was built into it. I think it came with it though. But the resurrection ritual, if all of your abilities are on cooldown, it will give you a resurrect, which means you cannot be killed as long as your abilities are all on cooldown. I threw Berserker and Finesse on there. Yeah, Finesse kind of counteracts it because, I mean, it technically, if the cooldown is 1 or 2, it lowers it by 1. But I mean, if you're doing that, you're most likely building up to using it because you're going to be using things like Ninjutsu, Dreadnought, really big abilities that increase your cooldowns so that you can use these abilities. And then as for the taking item, this has to be the first dungeon that I would say that Clear Potion is one of the best items. It's going to be your best friend. If you run out of clear potions, you're probably going to want to find a new one. If you can get your hands on them, that is. If you can end up getting the infinite clear potion while you're in there, or even reusing, even though it would take up an extra ability slot to where you'd only have 3 combat abilities, to be able to infinitely use these clear potions will save your life tons of times in the extreme dungeon. With it removing all of your ailments and increasing resistance, it will make it to where, and it's not like a small increase in resistance, you gain like 1,000% resistance with this damn thing. So when you're shooting up to that high of a resistance stat, things are really going to struggle to give you weaken. They're going to struggle to petrify you, and especially if you have steadfast on top of that, it's just going to be really a living nightmare. It's going to give you a really good chance to live. As far as an amulet goes, this is very class specific, so I can't recommend anything. As far as general ones go, if you have them, Majestic Bloodline is still one of the best ones in my opinion, for the sole fact of if you use a dual class, that is, giving you that guaranteed crit chance, as well as Almighty for 10 turns, just at the low cost of not being able to escape a battle, is pretty damn good. So if you have that ability, I would strongly recommend taking it, just so that way you can have that kind of passive on your character on top of that. Anyway, I think that will about do it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. And if you have anything you would want me to try out, or if you think there's something I missed or would like me to explain more in depth, leave a comment down below and I will get to it. Thank you, and I will see you guys in the next video.